Good evening. Could I go ahead and have you take your seats, please? So the cultural oxymoron of the day is thinking Christian. Let's face it, Christians for too long have been living on the periphery of responsible intellectual existence, unfortunately, regardless of what we see in the media, the fake news, whatever you want to call it. Sadly, the pejorative nicknames that have been attached to Christians, especially evangelicals, unfortunately has been true. My name is Todd Von Helms. I'm a senior fellow at the King's College in New York City and a longtime friend of Dr. Stephen Smith, who's the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church. It was about 6 months ago that Stephen said, "You know, Todd, what I'm envisioning for the city of Little Rock can be a blessing to the entire city. It will be ecumenical. It will be a place in which we can come together to have conversations around ideas and debates that are shaping the culture and to show how the transcendent power of the gospel impacts every aspect of our society." And I said, "Stephen, I've got the exact idea for you." I said, "Come to New York City, come to the King's College." My senior fellow at the King's College, Eric Metaxas, has been doing this in New York for over a decade in what's called Socrates in the City. Socrates said that an unexamined life is not worth living. And we have debates and conversations of this type quarterly in the city. So Stephen came up last October along with a friend, and he said, "I get it. We want to do this for Little Rock." So it was about 6 to 8 weeks later in December, Eric Metaxas came down. We had a Socrates in the City type event that was called City Center Conversations. And these are conversations about God, life, and faith in the city. This is our third installment, probably our largest crowd of about 700. So we want to thank you for being here tonight. You're in for a treat with world-renowned particle physicist Mike Strauss, who's a friend of mine. He takes complex things and explains them to us, the general populace, and it just makes sense, and it's great. But he'll be introduced in a moment by Stephen Smith. So Dr. Stephen Smith, he's the mind of a scholar, the heart of a pastor. He loves the city. He cares deeply about faith and conversations of faith. And so join me in welcoming Dr. Stephen Smith.
I promise he owes me no money. That was quite an introduction. Thank you, Todd, for that. I'm so excited to be here. Welcome to our third City Center conversation. And as Todd really explained very clearly, our objective is to take the cultural issues that we face, issues that may be a little bit more right brain than we're used to engaging and thinking about, or left brain rather, thinking about things of faith and how they intersect intellectual thought and dialogue. And so we're very, very excited to be here tonight. So if you were here at our last City Center conversation, we had Lee Strobel here. It was a great night. And as you remember, we had talked to Lee about our next guest, who is tonight's guest, Dr. Mike Strauss, and he said he's fantastic. You've got to come and listen to him. And so you took Lee Strobel at his word, and you're here tonight. Mike Strauss is a world-renowned particle physicist, but he's also someone who is a deep man of faith. And so I've just been so much looking forward to this tonight. So many people have said to me, "Are you ready? Have you studied for this?" And so, Mike, there's just really room filled with people who have no confidence that I can carry on this conversation with you. So outside of that, I'm looking forward to a great night. So, Mike, why don't you come at this time? Let's welcome Dr. Mike Strauss to City Center Conversations. Thanks for being here, friend, very much. Have a seat. We are so glad that you're here. This is going to be fun.
It will be fun. I'm excited to be here. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for inviting me. I can't believe anybody would come out to hear a particle physicist, so thank you so much for coming.
They've been begging for a particle physicist.
Yeah, I know.
It's just been...
Well, and this is free. All the information I'm getting is free tonight. No charge whatsoever.
Yeah,
right?
okay,
Except
fantastic.
Just the entrance fee. Yeah.
Except the interest fee, okay. That's fantastic. So 23 years at the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And a lot of academic work, a lot of accolades. I think you're too humble to bring it up, so this means I have to. So I did get a chance to read your Vita and your CV, and I started counting the peer-reviewed articles. I stopped when I got into the 600s.
Yeah.
And so how many peer-reviewed articles do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
Something like 1,000.
Something like 1,000.
But I work with lots of collaborators,
Okay.
so I just sign my name to their papers.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, we'll just I'll just believe that.
Yeah.
Something like 1,000. And so tell us about your family before we jump into it tonight.
Been married for almost 30 years. My wife is very different than me. I can't remember right brain or left brain, but I'm the thinker and she's the feeler, and we have 2 grown children. One is here tonight in the front row, Zachary. We decided to make a road trip from Oklahoma to Arkansas and have a good time together.
Great, excellent. But you were telling me earlier you have a Little Rock connection, don't you?
I do have a Little Rock connection. It's kind of bittersweet. My father died of multiple myeloma in 1993, and when he contracted it, he was in California where he was a pastor, and they told us the best place in the country to get treated was Little Rock. So he came here a number of times to get treated, and through some complications of the treatment, actually passed away here. So I was doing research in San Francisco, got a call that I should come say my goodbyes to my father here at the hospital.
Here at Little
so
Rock,
I flew out here, and this is where he passed away. But it's bittersweet.
Yeah. Well, we are blessed to have this really great medical community inside Little Rock, so we're extremely grateful for them. So let me just ask this first question. So how in the world did you become a physicist? Am I envisioning a high school guidance counselor or something, just leading you down this path, or what? How did that take place? Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, this is a great story because I come from a family of pastors and theologians. My grandfather was a pastor and my father was a pastor. I had no role models for science at all. I spent 8 years of my childhood in Huntsville, Alabama, where they built the bottom stage of the Saturn V rocket that took people to the moon, and just was fascinated by that moon landing. So that got me interested in science. But the amazing thing is the day I was born, my dad was a student at Dallas Theological Seminary. And I got a letter from the president of Dallas Theological Seminary stating that if I ever wanted to go to seminary, I could automatically get into Dallas Seminary. So I grew up with this mixed interest in both science and theology. I went to college where I studied both. I got a major in what's called physical science at Biola University in Los Angeles. And then even graduating from college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So if your kids have no idea what they want to do when they graduate from college, there's still hope for them. I had no idea. And so I applied to graduate school in theology at Dallas Theological Seminary and to some places in physics. And I was one of the few people who actually got rejected from Dallas Seminary, despite the fact that I had a letter guaranteeing my acceptance. So it turns out that I guess Dallas Seminary was founded in 1924, and in their 94 years of history, or whatever that is, you can do the math, I can't. In the 94 years of history, they had 2 years where they had this policy that if you didn't know for certain that God was calling you to a professional Christian ministry, they would reject you, and I happened to apply in one of those 2 years. So I was rejected from Dallas Seminary. My dad was on the board of the seminary at that time, so... and I always wonder, who did God not want to go to seminary the other year? Because the policy was for 2 years. So anyway, I got accepted to UCLA, and I went there for grad school. And the way physics works is interesting. You take the same 4 subjects in the lower division classes in college, in the upper division classes in college, and then in graduate school. But I only had a physical science major, not a physics major. And so I'd only taken these classes at the lower division in college. So every other graduate student in physics had 2 years of classes that I never had. So I go to UCLA and I'm starting to take classes, and the very first day of class, the professor reviewed something that I'd never seen before in my life. You shouldn't be reviewing things you've never seen. And so I began to realize that there was this whole series of classes I never had. So I went to the physics advisor and said, I've never had all these classes. And he looked right me in the eye, I'll never forget this, and he said, how did you get in here? There's a confidence booster, all right? So here's what my mind is going. I think I said something like I must have good grades, but I'm thinking I should have been accepted to Dallas Seminary and I wasn't. I shouldn't have been accepted to UCLA and I was. And I said, well, what should I do? I've never had these classes. He said, why don't you try to maintain a B average, and then why don't you withdraw, because then you'll be a student in good standing. Withdraw from the university and take the classes you never had, just audit them. And so I got an A- and a C+ in 2 classes, that averaged to a B. and I started taking undergraduate classes I'd never had. Now, this is where God really wanted to teach me something. So you get the picture. I realized I should have never been at UCLA because I wasn't prepared, but yet I was. I should have been at Dallas Seminary because I was prepared, but I wasn't. So I remember even thinking before this all happened, I don't know how God is going to change my course from physics because I've been accepted to UCLA and I've never failed at anything. Don't ever tell God you've never failed at anything. And I thought, I've never failed at anything, so now that I'm in physics, it's going to happen. But then I was failing. So I decided I was going to take these undergraduate classes. Are we following this? It's kind of rambling, but... and I sat down for my very first test, my second quarter at UCLA, to take the undergraduate classes I never had, and I completely blanked out. I could not remember one thing I had studied. This test looked like physics would look to you, right? Okay, this is how it looked to me, and I sat down and could do nothing. And I took the test. I ended up getting a 19 out of 100 on that test. And after the test, I sat down at lunch, and I was really, really confused and kind of angry at God. I said, I don't get this, God. I should have been this one place, and I'm not. And then I shouldn't have been at UCLA, and then I am. So I'm failing, and then I'm succeeding, and now I'm failing again. I can't even pass this one undergraduate class. It was so sad. And there's been a few times in my life when I'm praying to God, and the thoughts that have come to my mind are so unexpected and so profound that I go, this has to be the Holy Spirit, and this was one of those times. And I sat down with this test that I had just failed, and I looked at it, and it all makes sense. And I worked it out perfectly at lunch. And I go, God, what is going on? You know, and what came to my mind was this. It was, Mike, you've always attributed your success to the gifts and talents that I've given you. But you don't succeed because I give you gifts and talents. You succeed because I give you the grace to use those. And I can take them away anytime, like I just did on that test.
Unbelievable.
And so this arrogant kid that thought he could never fail at anything got a lesson from God that you can fail at everything except for his grace. And I realized that from then on, if I ever saw any success in my life, it would not be because God's given me abilities, but because God's given me grace to use those abilities. I'll tell you the amazing thing. This is how hard physics is. The 19 out of 100 was a B.
You kept your average. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So from then on, I did well. And I got into a particle physics group. I had no idea what it was, and it's been great. I love it.
Yeah.
But it was so good because I learned that God can close doors that shouldn't be closed and open doors that shouldn't be open and put you where he wants you.
It probably, in a weird way, confirmed your call, right?
Absolutely. When it got rougher later on, you go, well, I'm right where God wants me.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. All right, we'll have you back to talk about that, okay? Because that's a pretty profound lesson. So what is an experimental particle physicist?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, most people know, but just for me, what is that?
Well, so there will be a quiz afterwards, so take notes on this. So we all know that the universe is made of atoms, and we all know that because I've seen it on Magic School Bus, so it must be real.
Exactly.
Okay. And every atom has a nucleus at the center, and every nucleus is made of neutrons and protons. And neutrons and protons are made of things called quarks. And elementary particle physics is to try to understand the fundamental structure of the universe and the forces that hold it together. So right now we think that fundamental structure is primarily things called quarks and leptons. And we want to understand those particles and how the universe is put together. So this is the question I asked. Suppose you wanted to know what your car was made of. We want to know what the universe is made of. And you don't have any tools to take the car apart. Suppose you can't reach in with wrenches or pliers or screwdrivers. What do you do to take the car apart? So you know how it's made. Well, here's the answer. You get the car going really, really fast and you smash it against a brick wall and you see what comes flying out, right? I tell my students, do this with your parents' car, not with your car, of course. But that's what we do. At this laboratory in Switzerland, we take protons, which are one of the smallest things in nature. We get them going really fast and we smash them against other protons. And we see what comes out, and we understand the structure of the universe.
Okay, do the Swiss people know this is going on? This is a question. Because it sounds very Ian Fleming, James Bond, kind of you're in your secret lab underground smashing atoms for the purpose of world domination.
If you saw the movie Angels and Demons, the first 15 minutes is a fictionalized account of what goes on at CERN, the laboratory. And it is fictionalized. There's nothing dangerous about it at all.
Well, so let's talk about CERN. So CERN, I think, is a designator for two things: the actual group that's thinking about this, and then the actual laboratory, largest physics laboratory in the world. Talk about that and your involvement in that.
Yeah, it's just great. I mean, this is a laboratory where people literally from around the world flock because it is the world's highest energy accelerator. So if you want to break things into smaller and smaller pieces, the faster things are going, the better the collision.
Okay, so that's bringing another. So what is a particle accelerator?
So a lot of people used to call these things atom smashers. And so if you ever heard of the atom smasher, the real name for it is a particle collider or particle accelerator. Atoms are way too big to smash. Actually, we do smash nuclei sometimes, but atoms are gigantic. So if an atom was the size of the room, the things that we smash would be smaller than a pinhead in the middle of the room. Okay, so we take these things that are really, really small, we get them going really, really fast, and we collide them to see what happens when they break up. And the pictures that come out look like a little 10-year-old with a spirograph, right? So imagine all these little spirograph lines coming out. And so I spent 7 years of graduate school and 7 years as a postdoc to understand spirograph drawings. It's really kind of a waste of time maybe, but it's fun.
So give us a visual picture of this. How is that the same thing as a superconductor, or is that something different?
They were building what's called a superconducting supercollider in Texas.
Right.
And the government decided not to finish that, and this is very similar to that.
Okay. So is it a mile loop, or is it how big of a loop?
17 miles around.
17 miles.
So under the ground, about 300 feet, is a tunnel that runs 17 miles around, and from the air, you can't tell it's there. It goes under the French and Swiss countryside. In fact, I go to an English-speaking church at a town in France, and if you look at a map, it kind of goes right under the church. And it doesn't bother us. We keep worshiping on Sundays and everything.
All right, so you're sending particles, microscopic particles, on this 17-mile loop, and that's their journey. What's their destination? Where are they ending up?
Yeah, so we pack about 100 trillion protons in a beam about 6 inches long and about as thick as a human hair.
Yeah.
And then we shoot those at each other, and they take, I don't know how much time, very little time to go around the 17 miles again, and then they go through each other again. So it's like shooting BBs at each other. Suppose you were to shoot a whole bunch of BBs at a whole bunch of BBs. Most of them would not hit. They would just pass through each other. But every time this beam of 100 trillion particles goes through each other, maybe 20 of these protons will hit 20 of these. And then they'll keep going around, and 20 more will hit. And that goes on about 24 hours a day, about 6 months of the year.
Okay.
And we get millions and millions of petabytes of data for you computer science people. And look at those.
Yeah. So I had to look that up, be honest with you.
Right.
Petabyte is a million gigabytes, is that right?
There you go.
So this tremendous amount of information, and it's being disseminated into banks of computers, right?
Yeah.
And so and you're looking for what? Patterns, asymmetry, symmetry, all these type of things?
So the things that happen a lot, we already know about. If it happens frequently, we've seen it, we don't care about it. So we're looking for things that are very, very rare. Some of you may have heard that this particle named after Peter Higgs was discovered in 2012, called the Higgs boson. We produce one Higgs boson about every 10 billion collisions. So 1 out of 10 billion is how often we produce those. So the other 10 billion don't matter.
So can you need to get that number up, by the way. I'm just not pleased with that 10 billion. So
talk to God about that.
Talk to God,
he gives us the numbers,
yeah. Speaking of God, that was referred to as the God particle.
Yes, it was.
So why is that? I know this popular fiction. Is that?
Yeah. So a Nobel Prize winner named Leon Lederman wrote a book about the search for this particle when we were building this machine in Texas. And his publisher said, well, if you call it the search for the Higgs boson, nobody will buy it. So we need a better title. And so the marketing team came up with the God particle. So it's really marketing is amazing. I don't understand it at all. And
so Higgs isn't the one who discovered it. He's the one that theorized that it might exist.
That's right.
Okay.
So this is amazing. In 1963 or so, Peter Higgs, along with 5 other guys, they're sitting down and doing their work with their pen and pencil, right? They're just doing math. And lo and behold, they look at the math and they say, hey, my math says that there should be a particle in nature we've never discovered. I mean, doesn't that sound a lot like an engineer? Doing math and saying, the math tells me what the building will look like, right? And this is how the universe is designed. But it's not only designed that the math tells us how the universe is designed, the math is interpretable by humans. So Peter Higgs looks at his math and he says, wow, my math says that there's a reality there, that there should be a particle there. And so 50 years later and $20 billion later, we find the particle.
At CERN?
At CERN.
Okay.
Yeah, my name's on the paper that found the particle.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Along with 3,000 other names.
Yeah. You didn't have to bring that up.
Yeah.
But so, isn't CERN also, could you say, where the World Wide Web was first utilized?
Yeah, so people ask me at times, why should we support things like physics? What's the application? And one of the applications is whenever we do high-tech stuff, other things, spin-off technology is made. So there was a lab in Chicago called Fermilab, and then the lab in Geneva called CERN, and they both do particle physics. And back in the 1980s, we were exchanging information between Fermilab and CERN, and somebody at CERN goes, there's got to be a better way to exchange information. And he actually invented the World Wide Web. So I'm in a building at CERN. When I go to CERN, I have an office, and literally on the floor below that is a plaque that says, on these halls, the World Wide Web was invented. And so, you know, if you ask particle physicists, are you out to change the world or understand the universe? We would say we're out to understand the universe. But it turns out that the things we discover or invent, like the World Wide Web, sometimes change the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. All right, I have two. I want to get to some other questions related to this, but I have two kind of burning questions in my brain. If you could just answer these, that are hard. If you answer these two questions, then you'll get your check. Okay, here's what they are. The first one is, what is matter? And then why does it hold together? I mean, you've talked about the protons. I can understand somebody explain to that. Here's what composes an atom, which you said, of course, is huge. Yeah. So here's what composes this huge atom. But why is it all sticking together? Why isn't why the particles holding
what
together?
Is matter is actually a tough question, because the traditional definition of matter is something that has mass and takes up space. But the particles we deal with may or may not have mass, and they may or may not take up space. So the traditional definition of matter doesn't apply to the particles. A particle called a photon, which is a particle of light that bathes this auditorium, is a particle without any mass. And as far as we know, particles like quarks don't take up any space. So what is a particle then, rather than what is matter? And the answer is, we know particles exist by the way they interact. You don't necessarily see the particle, you see it interact. And if it interacts in this way, we call it a proton. And if it interacts in this way, we call it a photon. But it's its interaction. And that's what holds it together. It's interactions. So in particle physics, the interactions can be thought of as particles themselves. So the example I give is, suppose I wanted to send a message to you. I want you to come here or something. But you're over there and I'm over here. So what do? I start throwing baseballs at you, right? Anybody who's asleep, I'll throw baseballs at them and, wake them up. And so that baseball is exchanging information. And that's the force that ultimately holds us together. And so the universe is made of particles, which make up all of matter. And it's made of forces, which hold those particles together. And so the short answer to what keeps them together is there's 4 known forces in the universe. And those 4 forces hold the universe together.
All those 4 forces are operating at the atomic level. They're operating at that small of a level.
Some are operating at larger levels. Gravity is one of the forces.
Right.
Fortunately, it's keeping us on the earth, right? And electromagnetism is another one of those forces, which has to do with the electricity we use, the lights we see.
Right.
And then the 2 other forces only operate at the nuclear level, inside the nucleus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's this great, my favorite passage of scripture is Colossians 1.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Verse 17 says, in Christ all things, Ponta there, all things consist. It's great preaching
Yeah.
to say Christ holds all things together. But as a physicist, what do you do with that? Are you dismissive about that? Do you think there's anything there? Because you're an interesting guy, Mr. Mike Strauss. You're a physicist who got rejected from seminary. Not everyone can say that. So but you do have a theological background. It's in your family, these type of things. So as a devoted Christian, what do you do with that scripture?
So that brings up a story from my childhood that you don't know about. So I'll tell you this story. When I was in, I think, a 4th grade, I went to a Christian camp. And my camp counselor brought that verse up. And here's what he said. He said, inside the nucleus are a bunch of positively charged protons. And positive charges repel each other. And so the nucleus should fly apart because all the positive charges repel. And he says, but Colossians 1:17 says, in Christ all things are held together. So what holds the nucleus together? He said, Christ did. And his implication was Christ does it supernaturally, apart from nature. So it's kind of ironic that I've spent about 40 years of my life studying the strong nuclear force, which holds the protons together in the nucleus. So I think that verse is not to be taken from a physics point of view.
Yeah.
Most of the things God does in nature, he does through the laws that he makes. And there is a strong nuclear force that's attractive and stronger than the repulsive force. So I don't think Colossians 1:17 is saying God supernaturally overcomes the laws of physics in order to hold the universe together. But I do think it's both metaphysical and real, in the sense that it is Christ that is the focus of this universe and the history of this universe and the laws of physics of this universe. The laws of physics point to a God. And so I think in essence, all of nature is held together by this one unifying theme of the God that created it.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's your answer, because earlier in that verse it says all things are created through Christ.
Yeah.
So maybe the execution of the creation of the world and the power of the Christ, however dynamic that was, is still sustaining the atomic structure, whatever else that's going on in the universe.
So this is kind of a sidelight, but sometimes my scientific colleagues who are also Christians, we ask this hypothetical question. Did God create a universe that works so well like a clock that if he was to leave, it would keep running? Or is his active involvement required to keep the physical universe running? And you get different opinions.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we're having this conversation, and you're talking about God in one sentence and science in another. That's probably not like every scientist, I'm assuming.
Yeah, probably not.
So are we to believe, and open-ended question, that science and faith are in conflict? And you have the scientific community that may say that we're suspect because we are people of faith. And then oftentimes you have people of faith thinking they can't trust science because they are people of faith, or are taught not to trust science.
Yeah, there's so much heat in this conversation and not much light. And that is one thing that I feel privileged to be able to do, is to try to bring some light to it. Part of it depends on your definition of science. If science is by definition only dealing with the physical world, then it can't tell us anything about God. But the word science comes from the Latin scientia, which means basically knowledge. And if science is a search for knowledge by studying the world, then it could give me information about a creator if there is one. And so to me, there is no conflict at all between science and Christian faith, because science is the study of God's creation, and the Christian faith is a study of God through his, so the creation is what we call the general revelation. I don't have to teach you theology, I don't think. But we call this general revelation, right? And the Bible we call special revelation, but it's both revelations from the same God. So it should give us a consistent picture. And this is exactly what I find. When I look at the creation, I see the same picture of the Creator that I see in the Bible. And so rather than being in conflict, they're actually in complete coherence.
See, it's interesting to me because, I guess the question, did you ever have a crisis of faith? I mean, you grew up in a evangelical, conservative, Bible-believing home,
Yeah.
you find yourself at that bastion of Christian faith, UCLA, right? And so in that trajectory, was there ever a point you felt like you had to make a decision, or there was a crisis
Yeah.
moment?
So I could ask anyone here who's a follower of Christ, have you ever had a crisis of faith? Right? Wouldn't every hand go up? How can you walk with somebody? I mean, the Christianity is about a relationship with Christ, a walk with Christ. Every relationship has crises, right? So yeah, I've had lots of crises of faith.
Yeah.
But this is where I think I have, I don't know what a tenacious personality. If what I believe is true, then the answer on the other end of that crisis should be satisfying. And so I'm a passionate seeker of truth, whether it's in the natural world or in my faith. And so when I have these crises of faith, my first response is, well, God's not worth it, right? Because it's a crisis by definition. But my second response is, maybe I don't know something. Maybe on the other side, by studying more, by learning more, by understanding God more, there's actually a deeper understanding. And that's usually what happens. I usually find the problem is not God's problem, but my understanding of God's problem.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could do is you could flip the question and wonder, did someone who is an atheist or agnostic, had they had a crisis of faith?
Yeah.
So in your experience, have you felt like scientists have come to something that, whether they accept it or not, seem to argue for theism?
Yeah, see, so this is an important point that I think a lot of people don't really get. So many scientists think if I found a natural explanation for something, gravity causes the Earth to go around the sun. So therefore I don't need God because I have a natural explanation. But does a natural explanation really take away from the need for a designer? I mean, gravity is what we call a 1 over r squared force. If it wasn't that, it wouldn't work. Why is it that way, you know? And so I think that you can look at the natural world and see, not that because things work so well, because I have an explanation, therefore I don't need God, but you can actually flip it around and say, because the world works so well, maybe there's something behind it. The same way that, you know, the building is holding itself up because some engineer did the calculation. Maybe the universe works so well, and therefore I can explain it because there's somebody behind it all.
Yeah. I'm just curious. I'm picturing you in Switzerland in your secret lab. It's not secret, but that sounds more
we
interesting.
have secret sauce
do you?
parts of it,
Okay,
yeah.
secret lab,
I'd
underground.
have to kill you if I tell you.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't want to know. So you have a friend who doesn't have your faith commitment. That would be possible, but has your same commitment to physics. So what's that like? Is there a line you can't cross with them?
Well, it's like any job, I think, right? When I'm doing my job, I'm still a Christian, but, you know, I'm trying to understand nature. And so the better I do that job, I don't know that my worldview necessarily comes into it. And so there's not a conflict. The conflict is over personal things, right? When somebody has a crisis in their family, their mother has a terminal illness, and now you have things outside of your understanding nature that affect the job. And that's where, you know, people live their life and ask questions about God. Occasionally you have someone who will make an offhand remark about how amazing what we're studying is and how well designed it is, and it opens up the door to say, yeah, I wonder if there's really a designer.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks pretty much designed.
Look at this design,
Yeah.
Well, I want to jump back to the CERN project and ask the question why you're doing that. But let me lead into this with a quote, because I think part of what you're doing is you're trying to get at origins, right? How did all this start?
Yeah.
It's part of what's driving the CERN project, which is interesting. So there's this international scientific commitment to origins. And so this is something you said earlier in the year. I'm quoting you from your blog site. Because we don't have any observations that tell us exactly what happened, quote, in the beginning. So we have a faith commitment. You affirm the inspiration of Scripture. I affirm the inspiration of Scripture, believers. So we know there was a beginning. I believe God started it. But no one was there to record how he executed what he did. Because no one knows exactly what happened in the beginning of our universe, we can only speculate, but let me point out the obvious. All the observations we do have give credence to the conclusion that all of space, time, matter, and energy of this universe had a beginning. Yeah. Now I want to read more, but just comment on that for a second. Is that a universal conclusion that the universe is not infinite working backwards, but it had a starting place?
Yeah, I mean, there's debate about everything, right? I mean, if you've read the internet, you probably know that everybody's got some opinion about something, but the general, so what we know for sure, let's say we were to take the tape of the history of the universe and run the tape backwards. We would all agree about everything, more or less, till you get to about 10 to the minus 30 seconds after the Big Bang. So, decimal point followed by 30 zeros and a 1. At that point, the picture starts to get fuzzy. And the picture gets fuzzy because we don't have a mathematical model that necessarily describes that time. So I run the film backwards, and everything looks like it's pointing to a beginning. And everything I do know, all the observations and all the calculations, including this great calculation by three physicists, Guth, Bourdais, and Vilenkin, which we can talk about, says there's a real beginning. But the film all of a sudden breaks, and we don't really see the first 10 to the minus 30th seconds. And so that's the moment we don't know. So some people will say, when they talk about the Big Bang, they don't mean the actual 0 point, time equals 0, the beginning, because we don't know that. Some people mean it's about that 10 to the minus 30 seconds after the origin. And believe me, I mean, it's really weird. Does a decimal point followed by 30 zeros and a 1, that many seconds really make a difference? The answer is yes. Because if we start at that time after the Big Bang, everybody agrees. But if you try to go back to the actual beginning, that's where speculation occurs.
Yeah. And in a sense, that's why you're doing CERN, right? You're trying to, in some ways, replicate what happens. So if you can see patterns or something that you're seeing there with the data, that can tell you something about origins.
Yeah, so let me describe that just briefly, because I said the goal was not to understand the origin of the universe, it was to understand the structure of the universe, and now you bring up origins. So if you were to take the whole universe and start to make it smaller and smaller and smaller, it would eventually have all the energy of the universe in a really small space. And so the energy density, the amount of energy per size, gets really, really big. And when we take our colliders and we fire protons together, we also have what's called a really high energy density. So when we fire protons together, we're actually recreating what the universe was like about 10 to the minus 12 seconds after the Big Bang. So even though the goal is to understand the structure of the universe, for free, we get the origin of the universe, right? I mean, just a couple minor questions. What's the origin and structure of the universe, right?
Right.
And we get that for free because we create these high energy densities that only existed 10 to the minus 12 seconds after the Big Bang. So I know you know all that. So
but I very much appreciate you reviewing that, for, the lay people here. So it would seem to me that someone would get behind that and say, if I could say it crassly, who banged the Big Bang? What's there? And so with that thought, let me keep reading for that same paragraph we're left of. The Big Bang is a misnomer, for it is not some kind of explosion, since there was nothing that existed to explode. So nothing's acting and reacting because there's no matter to act. So someone has to act to create the bang. It is the origin of the universe. So if this universe had a beginning, then the cause of the universe cannot be a part of the universe. Yeah. That's a fascinating thought.
That's what my philosophy friends would tell me, right?
Right.
So this is what's so amazing. If we were sitting in this auditorium 100 years ago and you ask any scientist, what do we know about the origin of the universe? The answer would be absolutely nothing. Everybody thinks the universe has existed forever and the universe is infinite. So 100 years ago. And then all of a sudden the data starts coming in. And all the data points to everything in this universe, space and time and matter and energy having a beginning. I mean, what is it like without time? What is it like without space and matter? I have no clue. I live in this universe. But all the data, both theoretical and observational, points to this universe having a beginning. which means just what you said, or what I said, or whoever said that, right? That the cause of the universe can't be part of this universe. It's outside the universe. Now, when that evidence first started coming in, there were scientists who said, this can't be true. We can't point to the universe having a beginning because then everyone will have to believe in God. If the universe has a beginning, we have no alternative but believe in God because somebody had to start it. And so scientists still don't like the idea that this universe has a beginning, despite the fact that all the evidence points to it, because the question is so obvious.
Well, I would not have believed this if I didn't see it with my own eyes, but I watched Dawkins interviewed from Oxford, the famous atheist, and they asked him about the origins of the universe. And essentially his answer was he knew there had to be a beginning, so some extra life outside of Earth came and placed it here. And this is not, your weird uncle, somewhere. Yeah. I mean, this is this world-renowned, maybe the leading atheist in the world who would rather believe that an extraterrestrial force put life on the earth, because it has to have an origin, than accept that there be a God.
Yeah. Well, in fact, when you read things on the paper that say the Big Bang is in question or something, they're not questioning from 10 to the minus 30 seconds till now. They're questioning that exact origin. And there are many speculations. A physicist at Arizona State named Larry Krauss wrote a book called A Universe from Nothing. And his whole thesis is this universe came from nothing, even though it had a beginning, right? Well, what comes from nothing that has a beginning?
Yeah.
And you just see behind a lot of this is this theological implication that we can't believe there's a God, so we have to come up with some alternative. But if you were God and you wanted to write a story that showed that you existed, you could not do much better than what we have with the origin of the universe.
Yeah.
It says something outside of this universe that looks a whole lot like the God described in the Bible started it.
Well, I'm quoting another physicist said this, quote, "The best data we have are exactly what I would have predicted had I had nothing to go on but the first 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole."
Yeah, I think that's Arnold Penzias that says that. Right?
Okay, but so that's not like me, a raving fundamentalist pastor. That's someone now why would you, as a physicist, agree with that statement?
Because the first verse of the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The universe had a beginning, and that beginning created everything, and that's exactly what science says now. I mean, it's remarkable. You could not have predicted this 100 years ago, that every scientist would stand in front of you and say, all the data points to the fact that the universe had a beginning, which looks a whole lot like the God of the Bible. Now, scientists don't like that, so they come up with alternatives.
Yeah.
But the story as written is pretty unambiguous.
Yeah. So in your community, there's universal consent that there was a Big Bang.
If you describe that as 10 to the minus 30 seconds after the origin.
It's exactly what I meant.
Fine,
yeah, exactly what I meant. So there's a Big Bang. So the origin of life is a big, I think, debate universally, perhaps. And in the Christian community, we have our own sub-conversations about this. Interestingly, I would describe myself as a young earth creationist. We have a legacy pastor at our church, where I'm Emmanuel Baptist Church, who wasn't that. He believed in the gap theory that was very popular 50 years ago, that the world was destroyed. Genesis 1 was a record of the remaking of the world. So you believe in the Big Bang, but you would not, that belief wouldn't force you to believe in evolution. Those are two different things inside your mind.
The age of the universe is completely separate from the history of life on Earth.
Okay.
There are many, this is an important point, because there are many views held by Christians who believe the Bible is true. It's not whether I believe the Bible is true or not that causes me to come to a certain conclusion. Like any piece of literature, there's good rules of interpretation which you learn in seminary. And when you apply those rules of interpretation to the story of creation, there's still ambiguity there. Yeah. And so within the community of Christians, there is a lot of different beliefs about how God did the creating, not whether God did it or not. And there are people who believe that there was no Big Bang, that God didn't use the Big Bang. There are people who believe God did use the Big Bang to create the universe. And then there are other people who believe or don't believe how much God might have used evolution. But
Yeah.
they're all separate issues.
Right.
The age of the universe, whether or not God used the Big Bang, the origin and formation of life on the earth, and whether or not God used evolution. And there are Christians across the spectrum. And this is one of the first things I lay down, because I know there are people who are outside of the Christian community who say, well, I can never believe the Bible because I can't believe this, that the Bible teaches this about science, or this about science.
Right.
And the big picture is, you can believe the Bible is true and believe in the Big Bang and or believe in evolution.
Yeah.
And those issues are well within good biblical interpretation. And I get this not because I'm a Bible scholar, but because I read Bible scholars. And this is what they say.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that you don't necessarily embrace a Big Bang cosmology in the way somebody else would say it, but that rather when God created all things, it began with a bang?
Yeah, and that is Big Bang cosmology. What the other question is then how did God create life on Earth?
Yeah.
And eventually create our physical human bodies? Was that a natural process, or was there more direct involvement? And even with the Big Bang, I'm saying there's direct involvement.
Yeah.
So the example I might give is, if you're a good computer programmer and you write a program, you don't have to go fix bugs. There are not many bugs there. So if you're God and you're writing a computer program that creates the universe, how often do you have to step in?
Yeah.
Right? I don't know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let me switch gears. What is fine-tuning? I've heard you talk about that quite a bit.
Yeah, so this universe is, and at least Robo talked about this a little bit at your last conversation. This universe seems to be finely tuned to allow any kind of life to exist, not just life like us. The example I sometimes give is, it's as if you have a panel with 100 knobs, and if you turn any knob just a little bit to the right or to the left, you completely screw up the universe so that life is impossible. And there are so many of these parameters that are just, in Lee Strobel's words, because I watched his talk, balanced on a razor's edge. And so I study some of those parameters. And almost every scientist agrees that this universe seems to be finely tuned and therefore probably extremely improbable. So therefore, how to get here?
Yeah.
And we could talk about some of those kinds of parameters and what it looks like.
Yeah, can you give me one example of that?
Yeah, so one of them is, so inside, there's a quiz, so you guys should know this. Inside every neutron and proton are quarks. And the quarks have a certain mass. They have a certain mass that they weigh, or even though that's wrong terminology if you're a physicist. But if I was to take the mass of the quarks inside the proton and change them by 2 or 3%, then it would turn out that there's not either carbon or oxygen in the universe. You get rid of one of those. And all life needs carbon or oxygen. So if I was to take just the mass of the quarks inside the proton and change them by 2 or 3%, there would be no life in the universe. There are like 100 things like that. And it's not that I can change this knob a lot. 2 or 3% is not that much. And you could go through a whole bunch of characteristics of the universe like that just are balanced on this razor's edge, and you change them a little bit, we aren't here.
So a non-theist looks at that, and what do they say?
The most common answer is that this is one of many, many, many universes. An infinite number, 10 to the 500, depends on your theory. Now, we're not talking this is one of many galaxies. We see lots of galaxies. This is one of many universes. And is there any evidence that there are other universes out there? The answer is no. So you have to invent other universes, because if there's a bazillion universes out there, maybe one is suitable for life and we just got lucky. But there's no evidence for it. So Christians are sometimes accused of what's called God of the gaps. You know that terminology? The idea is if we can't explain something in nature, God must have done it. We call that God of the gaps. So the tables have been turned. Because the universe looks finely tuned, and because the universe looks like it had a beginning, if you don't believe in God, you have to invent things that there's no evidence for to get rid of God. You have to invent multiple universes. You have to invent new laws of physics that brought the universe into existence. So I call it the atheism of the gaps. You have to take the gaps that we don't know, the things we don't know, and you have to say, well, everything we do know looks like God, So maybe God isn't in the things we don't know.
Yeah.
It's become the atheism of the gaps.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask a more practical question. And so with the City Center conversations, we're talking about the city. And so we're hoping that these conversations actually help serve the purposes. Little Rock is a unique city, incredible pluses. We have our own challenges and all these things inside the city. But how do these macro level conversations that we're having about science, how do they influence and work themselves out in everyday life?
You know, I can see how they work out in a personal life, right? If God cared enough about me to create this universe partially for me, and if he designed it so well, and if he made it so habitable, then he cares about me.
Yeah.
And if he can open doors to universities that shouldn't be open and close doors to seminaries that shouldn't be closed, then he's got a plan for me. And what I learned is that I would have never picked this plan for my life, but I love it. I love what I do in my job. I love being a scientist who can point others to faith.
Yeah.
And what I would say is that these kinds of conversations should be part of all of our normal life, right? You all have, you know, specific capabilities and positions that God has given you different than mine. And he wants you to have these same conversations in a way that affects everyone around you, right? And if we all bring God into our law practice or into our business practice or into our political practice, can you imagine what a difference that would make?
Yeah.
And if I can bring God into my science, then maybe I can make a little difference there.
Yeah. Well, your presence in that world is a gift because I don't have the capacity, the time, the ability to go do what you do and to think the thoughts that you do. But the fact that you've done that and you've come back out and said, my faith is as affirmed as it ever has, and I see what I'm seeing as consistent with the biblical record, that's amazing. That's verifying, it's encouraging, and it gives us more confidence as we work in a world that may be antagonistic toward the Christian faith.
And you know, that's the other thing. What I would say is what I've learned from comparing what I see in nature to comparing what I see in the Bible is that God can be trusted.
Yeah.
Because what he says in the Bible is so confirmed by what I understand in Scripture.
Yeah.
I mean, no one had to tell me the universe had a beginning. I could have just discovered it. But the fact that I discovered it and I'd already been told it said that can be trusted. And so there are so many areas in my life that are challenging to trust God.
Yeah.
And to look back and see that he's trustworthy because what he says about nature can be actually confirmed, then what he says about a relationship with him or who Jesus was can also be confirmed.
Yeah.
It gives you a great ability to trust God when you cannot see the answers.
Yeah, unbelievable. So the affirmation you seek may be coming even though you don't have it immediately.
Yeah.
So most compelling discovery or thing that you thought this idea, reality that we're dealing with physicists, other physicists don't even believe in God, has really affirmed my faith?
I think the most compelling discovery for me is some of the fine-tuning I've been a part of. I don't know how much time we have. So inside of every proton in your body, there are these things called virtual particles.
Yeah.
They're particles that pop into existence from nowhere and then disappear. It's as if elephants appeared in this room and then disappeared. Or my favorite cherry pie appeared in this room and then disappeared. And it turns out like this is really going on in every proton in your body, that particles are popping into existence and out of existence. Who would have ever come up with that idea? But if I take those away, then there's a chain of reactions that occur, which means I don't even exist in the universe, or the universe doesn't exist. And it makes me think of, I mean, and studying the inside of the proton is what I've spent a lot of my life doing, studying these virtual particles. And it makes me understand that there's a verse in Isaiah 55 that says, God's ways are not my ways, nor are God's plans my plans. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so are God's ways above my ways. And I look at the subatomic world and I go, who would have ever come up with this? It is so bizarre, it is so unique, and I've been a part of studying and understanding it. And yet it's necessary.
Yeah.
And isn't that what life is like? You're full of these things that you go, what is this? And why is this happening?
Yeah.
And who ordered this? Not me.
Yeah.
Right? And then God just says, well, don't you get that my ways are not your ways, but they're better, and that they're there for a purpose? And when life is not going well, which occasionally happens with me, right? I look at the subatomic world and I go, I would have never made it this way, but any other way, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so can't you say that out of life? I would have never done it this way, but maybe this is the best way that works.
So you remove this virtual particle that we can't even see, and we cease to exist.
Yeah,
Matter
chain of reactions occur.
Yeah.
It changes the mass of the proton. You
Yeah.
change the mass of the proton, you don't have atoms.
Yeah.
You change the atoms, you don't have us.
Yeah, incredible.
Incredible.
Incredible. Okay, I want to introduce you to somebody.
Good.
So, would you hear James Lloyd? Would you come up here for a second? So what we like to do at our City Center conversations is highlight one of the ministries that's inside the city. So James Lloyd is the director of Renewal Ranch. You may be familiar with this. Renewal Ranch takes men who may be court ordered, or maybe they can admit themselves in the program, and he runs them through a program that lasts a year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And here's the shocking thing, does it without any state or federal funding. I don't know how you do that, just with a general board. And so the winners in that's the city of Little Rock and the churches. We have people in our churches. One of our employees, Jonathan, has been through your programs, come back success, brags about it as a great poster. We have another one that's gone through, it didn't work out so well. So it's a tough and challenging thing that you have. But James, we're here talking about the conceptual level you're doing in a reality. Thank you for serving our city this way. We're just extremely grateful for you. And I want you to meet Mike. He has a check for you tonight. And the check is for all the proceeds that have come in for tonight. So if you gave your $10 tonight, you supported Renewal Ranch. So great job. Way to do that. So thank you, friend. Very, very grateful. Yeah. Appreciate that very much. Absolutely. Thank you. Very, very grateful. All right, Mike, can you stick around for more questions?
Absolutely.
Would you mind? Okay.
I would love to answer questions.
This has really been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I didn't zone out as much as I thought I would. But in all seriousness, you have the ability to take something that's deep and conceptual and make it practical and put our minds around. And so we're grateful for that. And we're going to pray you have tremendous success. You're in a strategic place that I can't go to as a pastor, other people can't go to, but you're there and you're having a presence. And so we're extremely grateful for that. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Very, very grateful, friend. Very, very grateful. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, why don't you go out this door right here and out that way. So I hope you'll stick around. There's a dessert reception immediately following on this corner. Mike is going to be out there greeting you, taking questions. There was a card in your seat or in every other seat tonight. If you're interested in getting emails about this, when our next event comes out, which by the way is going to be the first week in December, we're going to take the summer off and the first part of the fall. You'll be the first ones to get information about that, buy tickets, and take advantage of that before these events sell out. So if you want to do that, just write your email down there, leave it in the card, leave it in the seat, and we'll pick that up and put you on our email list. Thank you for being here tonight. A great night, and you're dismissed.